Welcome to the Reality Revolution. I'm your host, Brian Scott. And today I wanted to discuss a technique that's rarely talked about in reality transurfing that is one of the most effective techniques. One of the most powerful principles that's discussed in reality transurfing, go and look at my interview with Rene Garcia, is the idea of importance and how it creates balancing forces. And sometimes it's kind of hard to deal with. And so I've had people ask me, what's the best way to deal with importance? And I say, there's lots of different ways to do that. You can try my meditation, the balancing forces meditation. But there's a more effective technique that you can use all the time. And it's one of the most effective techniques to reduce balancing forces. It's the reality inversion technique. The reality inversion technique is discussed in chapter 15, Letters from the Past, at the very end of the chapter. And Vadim Zeland explains this technique very clearly. Bootsy Greenwood is very good at using this technique. Essentially, to describe the reality inversion technique, it's humor. But let's see what Vadim Zeland has to say about it. Zeland says that reality moves its frames indomitably along the film roll of time. Holidays come and go. It is just a shame that they end so quickly. Hemingway was right when he said that life is a movable feast that stays with you. Although rarely does anyone manage to live that way, the movable feast is unexpectedly lost somewhere along the way, after which all life's colors fade. Emptiness and oppressive melancholy fill the space in the soul, sometimes for obvious reasons, and sometimes not. The worst part is that the world sinks into darkness swiftly and willingly, whereas enlightenment emerges slowly with much anticipation. The tendency of man for negativity has its murky way, and an oppressed state results in which heart and mind agree how bad life is. When this happens, outer intention steadily shifts reality into the darker areas of the alternative space. The mirror responds quickly, without hesitation or delay, whereas enlightenment is then slow to appear, because when a person feels depressed, their attitude paints the layer of their world in ever darker shades. Sometimes everything seems so dreadful that you do not have the energy to recall transurfing or anything else. How are you supposed to break the vicious cycle and straighten reality out? Generally speaking, it is pretty difficult to do, and yet there is a radical method that can be applied called reality inversion. A long time ago, Zeland says, and still quite recently, just 20 years ago, when we were physics students, we studied at a positively awful faculty where the teachers embodied the brutality of cavemen. The first year started with 75 students, but no more than 25 made it to the finish line. In an environment like this, the working law was, if you want to make it out alive, learn to laugh. We made up a game which I forgot about afterwards, and only later came more fully to understand the game was played according to all the rules of transurfing. The essence of the game lay in turning your relationship to a situation on its head. That is, to initiate a kind of inversion. When things are bad, the pendulum rules make you suffer, worry, and crumble under the weight of your problems, and generally lose it or go on a complete bender. Our game rules dictated that you had to do the opposite. How well we managed it, you can judge for yourself. I was delightfully disappointed. Luckily, something terribly unfortunate has happened, or something irreparable happened and my affairs instantly took off. A fine gentleman in a car has just been so charming as to drench me in mud. All my attempts were in vain, which secured my success. She does not love me. No, that would be too good to be true. She is faking it beautifully. He dumped me and I laughed like a Boudini horse. And so, in the same vein of artful wit, the only thing that got in the way was the hysterical laughter that followed all our attempts to transform misfortune. You are not allowed to laugh out loud in the middle of a lecture, and so suppressed laughter turned into rumbling, snorting, chuckling, and gurgling, and various other sounds characteristic of ungulates and amphibians. During break times, the energy that accumulated poured out into roars of laughter, quite Castaneda-like in style. Now, I didn't realize that laughter could be Castaneda-like. So I would love to get your comments. Was Carlos Castaneda known for loud laughter? It is quite clear what was happening from the point of view of transurfing, Zeland says. Firstly, any associated importance is reduced, and consequently excess potential also. Secondly, the parameters of the thought energy of delight, even if it was silly, were far from corresponding to sorry lifelines, and so a more positive shift occurred at once. The mirror responds quickly, and so the heart and mind sigh with relief, and as a result, reality is evened out. Once we were preparing for an exam on the theory of probability. The teacher was a fearsome man, putting it mildly. It was a sinister night in the student rooms in the shadows of the exam the next day. My friend and I were racking our brains as to how we could even out the situation. Who knows what probability is and how to calculate it? It is a mystery shrouded in darkness. They are like old hags sitting there cramming. That is not for us. Are we real men or what? Half-baked bastards. One of the hags, overhearing our conversation, struck their head around the door. Shut up, lowlife. We are gentlemen, assholes, young scientists, morons. Eventually, someone came up with the idea of playing cards all night, at which point I said, "No, guys, that is over the top. I'm going to bed." But the gentlemen, dressed up in proper suits and ties, and with cheap cigars in their mouths and bottles of some suspicious-looking liquid on the table, they sat down to play. When I woke in the morning, I found them sitting at the table still. "You idiots," I said. "You're all going to fail." They stood up, shook themselves a little, and set off for the slaughter. As a result of their prank, they did not do well at all. They all got a C. Not me, though. I got an E. Now, I don't know what that means, but that was a true success. How they envied me. They all came up to me afterwards with a searching look and asked me earnestly how I did it. I held my head up proudly. "You see, I told you so. I hope you understand, gentlemen, you can stuff your sorry C's." The same day we celebrated my victory, and it was great fun. The next day I had to resit the exam and got an A. I'm not making it up. Believe me, if you do the inversion well, you will not be kept waiting for the result. If your mood is so low that you just cannot bear to bring yourself to do an inversion, then you have to make your mood even worse, taking it to the extreme, the grotesque, the absurd. If you increase the level of contrast in a slide to the maximum, there comes a point when it changes into a negative. That is pretty much what we were doing. One girl was feeling depressed. To make the situation worse, she dressed up in black so everyone would know she was in mourning. Her friends came up to her, expressing their condolences and inquiring about how exactly she intended to commit suicide and when she was planning to do so. Eventually, the group surrounded her and started wholeheartedly singing a depressing, sorrowful song with wailing and wringing of hands worthy of savages, the whole shebang. Gradually, the primitive song became prolonged cry and wolfish howl, and when they could hold it no longer, everyone, including the lady in the black, broke out into uncontrolled laughter. Of course, it's easy if you have a fun group of friends, but if you do not have, then you must manage alone. How do you do it? It is a personal thing. Joking aside, it really does work to take your condition to the absurd. Substances that bring about a change in consciousness should be avoided, however, as the results of taking something can be even worse. Personally, I'm no fan of using the contrast method in solitude, so I do not so much recommend it as offer the option up for information's sake. A low depressed state indicates that the energy levels of intention are extremely low. It is better to try and keep your energy levels at a healthier level in the first place and avoid depression that way. As you can see, reality inversion is similar to the principle of coordination of intention. The only difference is that inversion is a more radical approach based on humor. So if you don't control reality, reality will control you. And this is one step where you can do that. So if you have something that is important and you feel that you're creating balancing forces as a result, then create some humor around it. It's the best thing that you can do. A lot of times when you make something super serious, that's where the importance comes from. You take away some of the importance of it. It's hard to make something important when you laugh about it. And it seems cliche, and it seems important. If it's a relationship that you desperately need, then make a joke about it. If it's a business deal that you mean, then make a joke about it. It could be a matter of actually succeeding in your manifestation or not. There's something about this light-hearted attitude that is very powerful. And when you use it and when you do it, great things start to happen. So try it. The next time that you think that the importance is getting involved in something, or you're having a hard time letting something go. Because be honest, letting go of something is hard. It's still in the back of your head and it will come up again. So reduce it by making it funny. Create a joke about it. Now, he says it is hard when you're all alone and doing it, but I'm able to do it. I make jokes about stuff all the time. It seems odd, but you can do it. Write out the joke on a piece of paper. But also within this technique, he explains that you can make it absurd. By making it so absurd, take it to the point of absurdity, it creates humor in it, and then you're able to let it go. Have you seen this? Haven't you had a situation that's serious? That is why comedians are so powerful, and that's why we're so affected and attracted to them. One of the things that I've started to do, I have Sirius on my car, and I was always listening to very depressing news all the time, and it was bringing my energy down. Even if it's not, I'm not manifesting the things I'm listening to. It's just one of those things that if you have a constant drone of bad news, because it's not the news, you're listening to the bad news, because that's the only thing that sells. But on Sirius, they have several comedy stations. Netflix is a joke radio, so I started exclusively just listening to that. And if I laughed once on a quick drive, then it worked. There's something powerful about laughing. It's healthy and it's fun. So if you're having a problem, if you're by yourself, turn on some comedy special and laugh. Laughing could be all it takes for you to get out of the swell of negative energy that's pulling you onto a negative lifeline. It could be the secret to helping you to escape from an induced transition to some terrible lifeline that pulls you along. Just laugh. That's all you have to do. Laughing works. Now, I don't have the best sense of humor, and you don't have to, but you can still be made to laugh. So find things that are funny. Try to look at the absurdity in the world around you. And by noticing the absurdity in little things around you, then everything doesn't get to be so freaking serious. I talk to people all the time that have major goals, and they're so serious. And they're literally squeezing all of their intention energy with this seriousness. So relax and let go and laugh. That's all you got to do. Just laugh. And that's the reality inversion technique. A pretty powerful technique. So the next time you're dealing with importance and you're struggling with it, you can certainly meditate. You can certainly find whatever techniques that you use, and they all work. But just try to laugh. Make it absurd. That's all you got to do. And let me just emphasize why importance is such a big deal. Importance creates excess potential, and it in many ways can derail so many things that happen. When you're having anxiety and worry, those things are maximized unless you can reduce that energy. It's a free energy that you start to play around with. And when you do, nature will always take the path of least resistance, the least energy consuming method. And so when you start to put all this energy, you're going to create some kind of imbalance, and it will almost always affect what it is you're trying to do. Everything is unfolding as it should, and just remember that. It's a useful reference point. So allow yourself not to know how events should develop, and let go of the importance of the events that you're dealing with. And circumstances will begin to unfold in a positive way when you reduce the importance by finding humor in it. I hope that helps. I imagine right now that you find the humor in the things that you're taking so seriously. All episodes of The Reality Revolution can be found at therealityrevolution.com. And welcome to The Reality Revolution.